Welcome, everyone, to the Inimitable Impact Podcast. I am your host, Trent Witz, with co-host Kate Lavelle. Hold on.
Hey.
Wall Street Journal best-selling author, Kate Lavelle.
Oh, hey.
So, Kate, what we got on the show today? What are we talking about today?
Oh, yeah. We are talking about speaking your truth. We've got Coach Coach Hines all the way from Cali, 20-plus year football coach, well known for speaking his truth, speaking his mind, getting his convictions out there. And we covered a ton of ground when we had him in here. So we talked about an impact that started all the way back in 7th grade with one of his teachers that really changed the course of his life and where he ended up. We talked about a little trouble with the law in the college years. Remember that?
You fought the law and the law won.
It did. And that really impacted where he ended up as well. And but then we dug into our main topic for today, and that is speak your truth. And Coach Coach Hines is known for sharing his convictions, speaking his truth, and that is why his impact is so powerful. But I remember asking him what we all want to know: how do you face the fear of putting your convictions out there in a time of cancel culture, in a time when people are going to attack you, you're going to get retaliation, maybe they're not going to follow you and you can't leave your impact? So we had to know, and he had an incredible answer on how he has that confidence and how he knows he has to put his message out. So I think we need to hurry up and dig in, because episode 1, we got to get this going. I'm so excited.
What are we waiting for? Let's start it. Let's kick off the interview. First episode. Let's get it going.
All right.
In 3, 2, 1. Impact.
Yeah, Trent and I are so excited to get you on here, and I have been following you on Twitter for a while now, and all the stuff that you put out speaks to me so much. Really is in alignment with how Trent and I both view coaching, but way far beyond coaching, which is why I love having you on here, because coaching is a vessel. I know you know that. Tell us a little bit about. I know you coach football. I know you've been coaching football for a long time, and man, that is a job. I've had teams of 25 people, and I'm like, wow, this is a big team. You're probably balancing a little bit more than that. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah, just wrapped up my 23rd year coaching high school football, and the shortest off season because of COVID and all that stuff. We're gearing up for my 24th season. Coached, I was a head coach in New Hampshire, and was blessed to be part of building a brand new program there where the school had never existed. So myself and the other coaches and the players, of course, families, built a powerhouse out of nothing. And we thought, man, this is my coaching home, so to speak. And then our oldest daughter of 4 had moved out to San Diego several years earlier, had gotten married, and she called one day and she said, I'm pregnant. And my heart leapt, and I was like, yes, I'm going to be a grandfather. And then seconds later, my heart sank. I was like, oh, we're moving. Because I knew we didn't want to be grandparents on the other side of the country.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so hard.
So we're living out here in San Diego, and I'm coaching. I'm the head coach at Coronado High School. And as you said, I just absolutely love everything about the game because, and I know I'm preaching to the choir and probably 99% of your audience, it's a platform, as you mentioned. It's a platform to change lives. And, I won't get on a soapbox at all here, but one of my biggest pet peeves in the coaching world is when, it says sports build character. And I'm sure the two of you have been around the same. Sports only build character when coaches intentionally model character.
Yeah.
And of course I will not mention names or programs, but I have been part of programs before where that's the last thing they're doing is building character. And it's not the Marines tearing down to build back up. They just, when coaches use players as pawns, that is the most infuriating and heartbreaking thing. So to be in a position where I can be a head coach and select the men and women who are coaching alongside with me to make sure they are impactful. And I'm not going to say the word yet because I'm going to mess up the name of the podcast. But
it's the test.
I'm going to try. Inimitable.
There you go.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
But yeah, to be in a position where you can surround yourself with men and women who love people first, the X's and the O's or whatever sport you're coaching, that'll come. So that's.
You know what I think? Yeah. sports teach like, and I put a tweet out to this effect, and the funny thing was there were people that argued with me, and I was like, I'm not arguing back with this, but sports teach life lessons, and everyone assumes that means good ones, and I'm like, nope. They teach lots of life lessons. They might be horrible ones. There are people who leave sports, and I can tell you there are people who played for me back in my beginning days when I was figuring out coachings, and they didn't learn good life lessons. They did not learn leadership skills for me at that point, because I didn't have any. I was still learning. I was brand new, but yeah.
And I love that, because for me, I've also, and I love that you said people came after you, because we could say the sky is blue and people are going to come after us on Twitter. It doesn't matter what.
You don't like the ground?
Right. But I had put something out there several years ago about everyone's a leader. And my point was, we're not all leading down the right path, but someone's watching, a younger brother, sister, cousin, someone in the stands of a varsity game, whatever. And I was like, listen, Hitler was a great leader. And people get all defensive. Like, I'm not saying good leader. He was a great leader. He got a lot of people to lead in a horrible way, but he did get people to lead him. So the question for us is, we're all leaders. Who do we want to lead, and where do we want to lead them?
Is and this show is about impact. And here's the thing. It's kind of like body language. You can't, I feel like I'm going to double negative here and cancel itself out, but you can't not have body language. You're always emitting some sort of message. You can't not impact somebody. Like, your athletes, your whoever you're leading, if you're in a business, they are going to remember you, and they're going to remember you for something. And I remember, every time I've taken over a new coaching position, we'll talk about, like, the files will be a mess, or the uniforms will have the numbers, or, who ordered these numbers? They don't make any sense. They're not even in order with the sizes. I can't figure this out. And they're like, oh, that was the so-and-so era. That was when so-and-so was here. And I said, someone is going to talk about your time here as the whatever your name is era.
Yeah.
And it's going to describe something. What do you want that to describe? Because that's a kind of a powerful thought. And you think legacy, and it sounds so great, but I'm like, think about how they're going to describe what your office looked like when they showed up in your paperwork, because that's a thing.
It's powerful. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you've been coaching high school. How long have you been in Cali?
We moved out here 6 years ago, August 1st.
Okay.
Still love it. Minus the big asterisks of politics. We love everything else about it. The weather is beautiful. We love it. And all four of our kids are out here, and our two grandsons are 2.5 miles down the road. So
that's amazing. That's
blessed,
amazing. Trent is a full-time dad, so he is buried in kids stuff. His kids play, I think, 80 sports.
Between soccer, dance, baseball, basketball, golf. I mean, everything.
They're literally doing all that right now.
Like, I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
What are the ages?
My son he'll be 12, and then my daughter's 8. So
fantastic.
Being able to watch them in all their games and see them grow in sports is powerful. Just learning the game. Just like, I love it. I wouldn't have my life any other way. So.
Yep.
So what, Coach? What is it like as a parent, when somebody else is coaching your kid?
It's
kind of a loaded question, really.
It really is. It really is. Out of our 4 children, 2 of them were athletes, in team sports, and 2 chose not to be. It was really easy when they were playing a sport I didn't know, because I know what I don't know. So I was able to watch my son in wrestling, and the only wrestling I know is being on the top ropes with a chair, and that's not
WWE style.
Yes, son. Why didn't you pick him up and throw him against the rope?
Yeah, that wasn't the coaching he needed. My daughter Abby, she played field hockey and lacrosse, and I'm not familiar with those sports either, so I could just go there and listen. It was harder when my son started playing football, and not harder in the sense of me trying to think the coaches didn't know well, and he was blessed to have great coaches. But when I would pick him up from practice or from games, now we actually played each other. His junior and senior year, I had to coach against my son.
Oh, I've had to do that before too. It's interesting.
which was heartbreaking, and just moments I'll never forget. But he would ask me after games, he would say, how did I do? And I would always ask him, do you want me to answer as a father or as a coach?
Yeah. I love that question. I actually love that question.
And the interesting thing was, I could sense by his answer how he felt he did in the game. Because when he had a game that he didn't really perform that well, he'd say, as a dad, I'd say awesome,
Yeah.
super. And I wasn't lying to him, and it wasn't giving a father participation trophy. I was like, champ, I'm proud of you. Like you hustled, you gave your best, and yeah, tough things happened. And then sometimes you say, well, as a coach, how would you say? I'm like, rough. That was really rough.
Spritz tomorrow, 6 a.m.
Yeah,
That's the hardest part right now, watching my son play basketball, because I can't separate the coach and the dad. Like, I watch the game as a coach, and it's frustrating, but he wants to know after the game, how did I do? And I had to separate how you did as a player and, as a coach and the dad. So that's my hardest part right now with my son being, 12 years old.
Well, and I think the question that I always ask my son came from, and when my daughter would ask me, even though I didn't coach the sports that she played, came from when I talked to my own players. I would call them into the office often and say, hey, can we have a conversation? They say, of course, coach. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you about it as a coach right now. Yeah. Just from one man to another, or from one human being to another. Let's just talk. And I think it kind of levels the playing field, even though our children will always see us as their parents, our players will always see us as their coaches. I think when we can just, hey, listen, this is just from one heart to another. Let's just talk about X, Y, or Z. It kind of frees both parties up a little bit.
You know what was the biggest change for me? In one of the lessons that I really learned was that if you're coaching your kid, the second you dismiss the team, you have to take off your coaching hat, because you don't want to get in the car and continue to coach. None of the other kids are getting coached. They probably are, but they don't have their coach going home with them. You can't go home and then give them more drills. You can't keep talking about the game unless they're asking. That's, let them come to you at that point after you've taken off the coaching hat. But for me, the biggest transformation was when my son graduated from high school, because when he graduated, I felt the loss of getting to watch him play. And I remember I wrote an article right before his last game, and I just remember kind of tearing up, and this article went nuts. Actually went kind of went viral after it went out, but it was just talking about, remembering those moments and appreciating them, and all those practices that you drove them to, and all those, just disruptions in your life, and that I kind of complained about. And I'm like, man, I just want one more day, because watching my kids play sports is probably my favorite part of parenthood, and I was watching it and I just loved it. But I did stress, the coach, is going to be disappointed. What is he doing? And what's happening? And all of these things would go through my head. But when I watched him play his last game, all I could think about was, it's over. And I am so I didn't want the moment to end. I wanted to freeze time. Right. And I had 2 more kids going through sports that I still had. And everything changed. Every game after that, for the 2 of them, I just sat there, and we were getting our butts kicked on something. And I'm in the stands next to the other parents, and they're upset. And I can't believe we're losing. And I'm like, aren't they cute? Look at them run. Or, oh my gosh, he dropped the ball. He's going to be laughing about that later. Or I'm going to get, it was like this weight came off of me, because I saw what mattered, and my perspective completely shifted, because I thought, you know what? I watched it end for my oldest son and realized that none of those things I was worried about mattered at all.
Right. Oh, and what a blessing it is, because how many parents never get that until years later, when their kids are out of college and have families of their own. It's a powerful thing. Yeah. To I'm paraphrasing it, but to be where your feet are. And to realize that, I'm a huge Office fan, the TV show The Office.
Yeah, it's happening. Oh my gosh.
I don't say I want to pick fights with a lot of people, but if you don't agree on that one, we might go toe to toe. But in one of the episodes, one of the characters, Andy, says, "I wish we knew it was the good days before it was." I'm paraphrasing, but I wish you knew it was the good days before it was past the good days, or something like that. And just to be able to realize, this is what life's about. All those hectic travel, driving your kids to practice and picking them up late from school or whatever. That's part of what makes life so precious, is the little inconveniences sometimes.
Yeah. And for me, it's you have these experiences in your life that wake you up, and some people get them earlier than others, and some people get them in a stronger way than others, and some people don't see them as much. But for me personally, I had a pulmonary embolism in 2014. And 1 in 4 people, the first symptom of a pulmonary embolism, 1 in 4 is sudden death. I don't know if that's a symptom. I don't know if dying is a symptom, but supposedly that's how they say it. So 1 in 4. And, talk about waking you up and this is a silent killer. Pulmonary embolism. You don't have a warning. You don't feel sick. You're just like, hey, how you doing? It just goes like you have a blood clot that you don't know about and it just takes you out. And it's something that I live with for the rest of my life, that I know that I'm at higher risk of getting this. And so every single day I wake up and I'm just like, I call it my +1. This is my +1 day. And every single day is a +1 day. And every day I don't have any issues with blood clots. It's a celebration. And I might have bad moments, but I'm not going to have a bad day because, man, I am still here. But it took me, a lot of I used to be a really big complainer. I worried about a lot of stuff, and then it took that moment to kind of shape me. And that was my impact moment. And it lit a fire under me. I used to spin around a lot with a lot of ideas. I'm sure idea people, right? Like I got all these ideas and I'm going to start it and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to start it and I'm going to stop. And I would do that. I had like 10 books with one chapter written, sitting on my computer. I didn't finish anything. And it was the first time in my life where I was afraid to not finish it because it was like, I realized how finite time really, really is. And so I guess my question to you is leading this in like to our perfect segue here, but our mission here is to talk about things that have impacted us, that have really shaped who we are and have given us the fire to impact others. And I know that you impact so many people in things that, like we talked about, so much bigger than sport. So what got you here,
I love that question. And for me, it wasn't one moment. It was a series of moments that I really didn't connect at the time. But looking back, one is my 7th grade math teacher, Mr. Nicholas, who, and let me back up and say, I was a horrific student. I was the troublemaker being sent to the office. I was never a bad kid, but I like to goof around, to screw around. So it was 7th grade math. I was never great at math. Still to this day, that's not my strong suit. But he would sit on the corner of his desk every class and just talk to us about life and just say, hey, Trent, what's going on with basketball? Or hey, Kate, tell me about this or tell me about this. And it was nothing to do with math. And I remember sitting there, and it's strange because I'll never forget this, or I hope I don't. And just thinking, he cares. This guy really cares about me. He doesn't care that I'm bad at math. He doesn't care that I'm not top of the class or in the middle of the class. And so that was one. And it changed the trajectory of my life because I knew at that moment I wanted to be a teacher. The other was, probably sophomore year in college. God bless my parents. They're still alive right now. And right now they're very proud of me. But for years, I was that middle child in every possible way. I still am that middle child. But and I'll go as deep as you want with this. But I used to love to party and I used to love to fight. And there was one.
Which one are you doing here?
that was getting ready.
I don't know where we found this gem, but it's pretty good. Is that a button-down shirt?
That's criminal. Yeah. So yes. So this story here. Hopefully your listeners will be able to
describe this in case somebody can't see it. What are we looking at here?
My senior year, high school graduation, and man, that's embarrassing. I chose to share that. That's sad.
It looks great.
The school for some reason was making such a big deal out of, and look at that bowl cut too, by the way. That's probably why I'm
That is good. I think I saw that in Dumb and Dumber, didn't I?
Jim Carrey.
Yes, you did. There is so much wrong with this picture. So the administration my senior year made such a big deal about every young woman wearing a dress underneath their gown, every young man wearing dress pants, shirt, and tie. And I've never been a fan of leg prisons. I'm like, I'm not doing it. My parents were very supportive in that. What you can't really see great is I had tied to my shorts the bottom of leg pants that I had cut off, slacks I had cut off. And when I had the whole gown on, it looked.
There we go.
So it looked like I was wearing a shirt and tie and the tie had come off. So after I got my diploma, I walked out and flashed. And this was not premeditated. I knew it would be funny for a split second. I didn't realize that the gentleman behind me, who was our principal, Mr. Gray, and his daughter, who is a few years older than me, but still every year, the anniversary of his passing, she will message me on Facebook and say, this is a moment, one of his favorite moments in all the years he was a principal, because his heart stopped for a second. Because from where he's standing, you can't see
that you got any clothes on.
That I have my game jersey on. So I'm like, that could have gone really south really quickly.
Look at how oblivious they are in the background.
I know, they're just like,
They were, and I have mixed feelings about. I wish social media were around to capture that moment, video, if you will, back then. But then I rethink that. I'm like, man, it's a real good thing social media was not around when I was in high school. So this ties into my other moment was as far as partying and drinking and fighting. My brother and I had a party one time at our house, and my parents were away on vacation. And very long story short, 3 police officers came to the house, which they should have. I was out of control, and I ended up getting into a fight with 3 police officers. So it was a felony. It was a felony for each police officer, 3 years probation, all this different stuff. And I had a year later, still on probation, gotten arrested again at I think it was the University of Rhode Island. I had gone to a party there and done some stupid things, and stayed overnight. And the police chief the following morning called me into his office, or it was the following afternoon, and he said he was talking about the chief of police in Barrington, Rhode Island, where I grew up. And now I was the center, our quarterback. His father was the chief of police. So he was very well aware of that fight with his 3 police officers. Yeah. So when I got called into this other station's headquarters, if you will, or chief of police's office, he said, "Hey, Officer Young," or whatever his title was, told me you messed up 3 of his guys, and tell me about that. And I tried to be real humble at the time, and I wasn't cocky, but I was like, "Oh, it was a mistake." And he baited me really well. He's like, "No," he said, "you did a great job. Tell me all about it." So foolishly, I went right into idiot mode, and I started talking about the fight. And he slammed his fist on the desk about halfway through, nearly stopped my heart, and said, and I don't remember the exact words, but I remember that the message he shared. And he said, "Officer Young says you're one of the nicest kids he knows." He goes, "Do you know how many nice people are in prison because they never woke up and got their act together?" And that was one of the aha moments for me of, hey, this funny drinking and fighting and having my friends tell me about what I did the night before is going to get really old really quickly. And my wife and I got married at 22. This all ties together. She was never married before, but had our daughter through a previous relationship. I actually met my daughter first because I was working at a daycare center. And I knew I never wanted to be one of those fathers that went out and got drunk with his buddies, came home and got physical with his wife or children, and then had his wife apologize on behalf of the husband. And I realized that happens in way too many households.
Yeah.
And never will make light of that. Yeah. But I didn't want to be that person. So that alone kind of changed the trajectory of my life of saying, I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact in people's lives. And I was not the stereotypical football player. I love football. I love it. But there's a lot of dumb jocks, and not just in football. In the coaching world, and I might lose some followers here, but this is okay. There are a lot of those Neanderthal, hey, football's the best and this reigns supreme, and it's my favorite sport, but that doesn't mean it's better than anyone else's. And I realized that the world's overpopulated with dumb jock Neanderthal people who just coach or play a sport, and that's it. It's very surface. And I want to go deeper than that and make an impact. And I'll wrap up here so it's not too long. My very first coaching experience was while I was still in college. One of my professors reached out to me and asked a friend and I to coach a special needs flag football team. And I had always had a soft spot in my heart for children with special needs. So we did that with no coaching experience whatsoever. And they didn't really need a coach. They needed someone above the age of 18 to be there with these children. And there was a girl probably about 5th or 6th grade with Down syndrome. And I remember tossing a football to her underhand about 4 yards away. We weren't even 5 yards. And her dropping it like 6 times in a row. And that 6th or 7th time of her catching it, it was that aha moment where her eyes lit up, and it was like she just won the lottery. And that was the first time I ever thought about coaching. I was like, man, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but if I can marry these two, and that's just
feeds the soul, doesn't it? I always talk about people ask me, why do you coach? And I say, I coach for the posture change. And they're like, what do you mean? It's when it's that person that has been told you're not athletic. You can't do this. Or maybe it's the inner voice that's telling them that you're not an athlete. And I truly believe we're all an athlete inside somewhere. It doesn't mean we're a professional athlete. We're not maybe a great athlete, but we're all an athlete. We all have bodies that if you're blessed to live your life and still be able to move, you should experience that and you should use it. And, back to your point on kind of that, it's people that football is life. And there are a lot of people who are in sports and that's all they do. And I believe that we are breeding, if that's the right term to use, but more of that by this specialization when there are two. I don't know if you saw on my Instagram the other day, but there's actually a place, and I hope they don't call me and yell at me, but it was called, oh gosh, Trent, what was it called? The Toddler Sports Academy.
It was like
Playpen Sports Academy.
Yeah,
and I made a joke about fetus camp. Like that's going to be the next thing. Before your baby's born, we're going to specialize them in a sport. And when we do that, when we breed that, this is what brings your parents joy. This is what is important to us. This is what we're going to support. Our family vacations. And I do love to marry our family vacations with our tournaments because they were really fun, especially some of the cool ones. However, if your family vacation is only your sports teams and you're always on a tournament, that's not a vacation for these kids. Like they want to have a real family vacation. And what happens to these kids? And this is why I'm so against specialization, because I've watched it happen. They get into high school, they tear an ACL. Then they tear another ACL. At this point, they're doing nothing but rehabbing, sitting on the sideline, watching people play. And the depression that they go through because they literally have nothing else is incredible. If kids are not developing interests and knowledge of the world outside of sport, what happens if sport gets taken away? They literally have no identity. And we can't allow our kids to be raised thinking that their identity is in one activity or in one area, because they have brains and they have other things that they can utilize, and things happen. And I think that's so key. And also we're, wearing out your body before you, get into, when you have ninth graders coming to you with plantar fasciitis, which was only seen in 60, 70-year-olds a few years ago, something is up with all of this stuff going on. Yeah. So leading beyond the sport and having that, as we talk about, John Gordon companies talk about having that telescope vision, seeing that big picture, and then drawing into that microscope and looking at, what are we doing on a daily basis to help people see that big picture is so key.
And I think a huge part of that is, our players don't care what we say. They're going to watch what we do. Yeah. I can tell you I love you and pour into you when a practice is good, but if we're having a game and I tear you to shreds and embarrass you and put you down, they're going to remember that a lot more than 50 practices where you poured into them. I think it's important for our players to see that we as coaches, as passionate as we are about our sport, my players know I teach elementary school. There's nothing intense or manly or anything about that. They know I paint murals. They know that, my faith means everything to me. And I think it's important for us as coaches, as adults, whether we coach or not, to let our student athletes, let our players, our children see that as passionate as we are about one thing, that doesn't, as you mentioned, define who we are. There are a lot of things we can be passionate about, because the fact is, as you mentioned, with your scare, your health scare, for lack of better terms, that's such a blessing in some ways that people never have. Some people go their entire lives never really living, and always kind of putting things on the back burner until it is ultimately too late. And to have that aha moment where you're like, whoa, hey, listen, as cliche as it sounds, life is a blink of an eye. It's so fragile. And to not waste a moment. I tell people all the time, and I'm not making a joke of this, 99% of my friends and family make more money than I do. That's just a fact.
That's why we all go into coaching, right? For money.
That's why we coach, right?
Right. Well, the modeling career didn't work out.
And so podcast.
Right. Yeah. But even with that, I feel like I'm one of the richest people I know. And I mean that to the core. And some people can, kind of, poo-poo that or whatever, how you want to say it, dismiss that. But I do, it comes down to how you define wealth and happiness and joy and success.
There's a lot of unhappy, very wealthy people.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I tell people often when I speak at different clinics or conventions and say, there's not a greater coach than me. And I say this all the time, and the words I choose are very careful. When I say there's not a greater coach than me, I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else. But how I define greatness is being able to, and for me, the word is empower. That's the word I love. Yeah. If I can empower one person to live a better life, a more fulfilled life, to not take their life, to pour into someone else's life, how do you say that coach is not as successful as one that won a national championship? Yeah. So the coaches that define success only as money in their pocket or rings in their fingers, well, then they are more successful than I am. Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about what I define as success, then no one's more successful than I am, or no one's greater than I am, because man, if you're changing one life, I can't look down upon that and say, God, God's going to look down upon me and say, well, you only blessed 10 people. You could have blessed 11, and just.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do at North. It's we build young men. We don't just win championships. The championships are an after effect of what we do.
Yes.
We build student athletes, send our kids to college. They come back 5-6 years later with their own families, and they thank us, and it all made sense. At the time, they want to fight us and put us, this isn't working. When they come back and they talk to the team, it all made sense. The early practices, just like getting up. And Coach McKenzie, I'll quote him on this. His thing is, basketball is a microcosm of life. And I think that's just the same thing with sports too. It's just, everything you learn on that hardware, on that field, it's same thing in life. And that's,
Amen.
It's crazy how much of an impact just sports have on your whole life sometimes for some kids. So,
and this is a school where people weren't graduating, let alone going to college. And you guys turned that around to 100% going to a 2-year, 4-year college. That is
outstanding.
Every kid we've coached has gone to college. We 2-year, 4-year college, and these are the same kids that the news, the community, everyone puts down that they're not worth it. They're not worth it. And we stick to our guns. We just sent one kid who transferred in from a suburb school, didn't have a good GPA. Now he's going to play basketball in college. We had him a senior. His life turned around. He got to our school and he was like, I belong here.
Yeah.
That's for coaching. That's what impacts me. Like seeing that, like you said, like he got it and he wants to go to, college was not even in his mind. Now he's going to play basketball in college in Iowa. So
that's awesome. And that's what gets you fired up. That's what, it's funny, and I know we've all heard this and probably felt this, to be a successful coach, you have to have thick skin. For years, I said that, and for years, I believed that. Until for me, it was, a thick skin kind of makes you, it's like an armor that doesn't allow those arrows to come through your back and your coaching, but it also puts up a wall against people. And for me, successful coaching comes all down to impactful relationships. If people know that I love them, whether they're a D1 player potentially, or that redheaded stepchild that can't put his helmet on straight, that can't tie his own.
Or redheads. I'm gonna get letters.
It's I'm colorblind, so it could be
you're all redheads to me.
As long as they're not bald, that's fine. It's making a difference. Having those players know that you love them for who they are, not for what they do or do for your or my resume.
You know what the worst advice I ever got, and the funniest thing is that this is the most common and heard advice that I got when I started coaching, was you have to start out tough, you have to start out strong, and then you can loosen up. But I mean, I know you've heard this. I don't know how many people told me this my first year, and they were like, because they're going to run all over you. You can always loosen up later, but if you start out loose, they're going to run all over you. And what I learned, of course, I tried to apply that, and I lost miserably in that battle. What I learned is that all you're doing is creating a huge separation. And just like you said, that armor, when you put yourself on a pedestal, and I call it the old school coaching, this is kind of like, that's beneath me. Don't bring it to me. Leave it outside. You deal with it. Not my problem. All of that kind of old school coaching doesn't work, because everyone is craving connection. Yes. We're the most connected we've ever been with electronics, and the least connected we have ever been personally with people these days, because all of our communication, I mean, how many times have you texted somebody in another room? Be honest, right. You can get up and walk in there, but you're right. Oh, it's right here.
Or you walk into a group of kids and they're all like this.
Time for dinner.
None of them are talking. They're all just on their phone.
Yeah.
If they could text each other on the field, I feel like they would communicate so much better.
And that excites me even more, because with technology, how often, on average, a typical high school student will go to school 5 or 6 hours a day. So they're not with mom and dad. They're at practice, either getting ready for practice, cleaning up after practice for 3 hours, give or take.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet, I'm not going to put a number on it, but very, very low percentage are sitting down at the table having family meals now.
Right.
So when we have those, we have a captive audience. And I had one of my cool story. One of my former fourth graders, I teach at a private Christian school, but I coach at a public school. His parents had him come over, and he plays for me now, started for us as a freshman quarterback, for our varsity. But he was leaving one practice several months ago, and I was like, "Hey, love you. See you tomorrow." And his father's a pastor at our church, but he stopped the car for a second, and he looked at me. He goes, "Did you just say love you?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Man," he goes, "Coach," and he knows me because I've had 3 of his sons. But he goes, "Coach, I love that." He goes, "Hudson, have you ever heard that from a coach before?" And he goes, "No." And I said, I tell that to all my players, and I tell my players all the time. I'm like, love is what will, move mountains. Love is what will, and I think once again, in the world I live in, as far as a football coach, and I love it. I have some coaches who I love, who are great men, who have told me flat out they're never going to say that to a player. They're not going to use those words. That's weak.
Yeah.
That's and they're great people. I love them. But that bad
I love them, even though they won't.
right. And I think for some people, getting back to the whole adage that someone had said to you, and I had a teacher that said to me, "Don't smile till December," type thing. As far as,
Wow, that's rough.
you can lighten up and not tighten up. And she was a successful teacher, but that's not who I am. And I think one of the biggest disservices we can do to ourselves and to our players is try to coach and be like, and you can name thousands of other successful coaches. I can't be the next Bill Belichick or whoever, and I don't want to be. The world's good enough. He's great.
You can't cut all your sleeves off your sweatshirts. I mean,
I would try. I would try.
Funny story. He actually played lacrosse and football with my dad in high school.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very
out
cool.
in Annapolis.
That's awesome.
But I just on the love piece, and what the most powerful thing for me on that, and I started adapting this, telling my players that I love them, because one year I got to the end of the season and somebody put a tweet out that said that I was a life ruiner. And this was when I was just starting out coaching, and I had truly cared about this athlete, and they didn't get the playing time they wanted. And I kept trying to express, here's how you get it. And I felt like it wasn't getting through, and I thought I was doing everything I could. I learned a few more tools, along the way, but it wasn't getting across. And that is how she viewed me. And I thought, they don't know that I love them, because before that, I thought they just know. And it hit me that they don't know it. And so I started telling them all the time, even if we had a really bad game or a really icky practice. And I'd be like, you know what, guys, I think we can bring more effort tomorrow, but I love you. I love that you're here, and this is what we're going to do together. And it just kind of became a part of me, just like I talk to my kids. And this came back to me back in 2019, I guess it's 2019. And this was my last college coaching job before I moved back home. And I wanted to finish watching my daughter's games without having to fly back and forth during season. And I snuck out right before, towards the end of the season, I snuck out for Super Bowl to go home and watch that. And then I was going to fly back. So I went home for like a 3-day weekend. And right before I left, it was Friday morning, and every Friday I did my one-on-ones. And I do them every week. And so I was kind of like, I could skip these. I could get on this plane. It was a little 6-person plane I had to fly to get out of this little tiny place in Colorado where I was coaching. And I could just go home. And I was kind of anxious to go home, miss my family, and I want to see my kids, but I stayed. This is important to me. I've agreed to do my one-on-one. So I did it. And one of my players actually walked me out to my car afterwards, and she gave me her ice scraper, because I didn't have one in my car. We're in Colorado. I don't have an ice scraper. It's freezing. There's snow. She dug me out. She had like, sneakers. She wasn't even dressed for the snow, and it's up to our knees. And she's digging my car out. She's like, "I got you, coach. I got you." I gave her a hug, told her I loved her. And I was like, "All right, I'll see you on Monday. I'll be back Monday." Well, Sunday during the Super Bowl, I kept getting all these phone calls. I'm like, what is going on? What's going on? And finally I heard that she had been in some sort of, car accident, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. Well, towards the end of the game, someone called and confirmed she passed away.
Oh,
she hit a 18-wheeler on a really dangerous road out there, and she had passed away. And all I kept thinking about was, obviously, one, just this like incredible crushing pain, because if you've ever lost one of your athletes, it is like losing one of your kids. And it doesn't matter that I was only there for that year. It's like, because you do love them deeply, and you spend all that time investing and getting to know them. And but I kept thinking that I had that incredible conversation with her. Her ice scraper was still sitting in my car when I got back to the airport, when I got back, and I still have it. It's sitting in my office. But the conversation we had previous to that one-on-one was not a good one. It was about her academics. It was about what she was doing. It was stressful, and it didn't end horribly, but it didn't feel good. And I thought, if I had skipped that one-on-one, if my last words to her hadn't been a hug and I love you, I would be, it would have been 10 times worse than what it was. And man, we got to tell them. They don't know. They don't know, because when they see discipline and when they see us pushing them, sometimes that translates into something else, and it's okay to tell them. My personal opinion. I don't know what do you guys do over at no, I know I have a picture of Trent, if you see my Instagram, with him hugging that player.
There's lots of tears at the end of the season. I mean, these kids are ones that, they weren't supposed to make it out of the city. Weren't supposed to make it out of the north side. So it's to see his kids going to college, and that actually becoming the realization that, high school's over, I'm going to college. A lot of tears, because it's so impactful. It's just, it's one of those things, like, we always say at North, this is a family. Like, once you play for us, you're part of our family. Doesn't matter if you're 50, your kids are our kids. This is a family. If you guys ever need anything, come back. And that's like, the coaches are all family. We've all known each other forever. And that's super. That's why I love coaching there, because it is a big family. And I think that you guys can both agree that it's a family. It's extended family for you. And that's why it's so meaningful. And that's why saying love to the kids isn't like so an alien phrase, like, oh, you can't say that, because you say you love your family all the time. And that's,
if your player's surprised when you say you love them, you might need to have a conversation.
Exactly.
Yes.
I love you. You do?
Yeah.
Oh, we should talk.
I think the sad reality is there are, and this is something that when I was a head coach in New Hampshire, this happened, and it occurs now every practice in Coronado, where at the end of every practice, every player comes through and shakes every coach's hand. I've never asked them to. I have no idea how it started back in New Hampshire. I don't know why it continued here. It's not something I asked. One of my very good friends and assistant coaches back in New Hampshire, one year he's like, guys, I'll shake your hand at the banquet at the end of the year. I don't even shake your hands. And so I watched that, and he's a great coach, but he's one of the ones that said, I'm not going to say I love you to a player. Yeah. One of my other good friends and coaches also, I saw him watch that, and then I saw him reject someone's handshake. So I pulled him aside a few practices later, the coach, and I said, I won't say his name, but I'm like, hey, I just noticed you're not doing, He's like, well, yeah, I'm kind of doing what so-and-so is doing. I'll shake at the end of the year, I don't shake everyone's hand. Yeah. And I said to him, I said, what if you're the only adult in his life that he respects enough to shake your hand? What if he comes from an abusive situation or a neglectful situation, or he just got into a fight with his dad? What if that handshake is going to lead to a conversation that leads to him from not hurting himself or doing, and I wasn't trying to convince him to shake hands, but I thought, man, here's one of the greatest things we'll ever do is connect with these players. Yeah. I'm more interested about you connecting with him as a football player than helping him throw a football better or more accurately. Yeah. I had a player my first year at Coronado 4 years ago. I kicked a player off the team, and it was heartbreaking. He was a stud. We definitely could have used him, but he had done a lot of things in a very short period of time that led up to this. When I kicked him off the team that particular game, or practice rather, I addressed the team, ended practice a little bit early, went up to have a coaches meeting, and as soon as I got into my office, the floodgates opened up. I was like a 13-year-old schoolgirl that just got dumped. I was a mess. And I'll tell you,
such a good description. I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember
that. Right. And two of my coaches who had been there for years said no, and I'll say the young man's name, because there's a great ending to this, or not ending, but continuation. They said Jacob's always been a stud, and he's been allowed to miss practices and still start on Fridays. He's always been like that, coach. Well, I called the player and his mother, parents are divorced, 2 weeks after I kicked him off the team. I emailed actually, and I said, I'd love to meet with the two of you. You are not going to be playing for us again. He was a senior. So I wanted to make sure that he didn't come in with false hope. I said, but I'd love to sit down and talk to you. So they came in, looked him in front of his mother, and she was shocked. I said, Jacob, I love you, and I love you enough. I learned not to say but. Too often raising my own kids, I would say, I love you, but.
Yeah, you hear nothing before the but. Yeah.
So I try as often as I can now to say, I love you. And because I love you, I'm still not allowing you on the team if you want to help out in some way. And he kind of understood it. Just before our season this past year, so 3 years later, we're on the practice field and a bunch of guys are playing basketball. and I hear Coach Hines, and I look over, and he's coming towards me, arms wide open. He's all sweaty from playing basketball, gave me a big hug. And he's like, I need to thank you for helping me save my life. And I looked at him. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you kicking me off the team was the best thing that's ever happened to me. And he started getting a little teary-eyed. So I wear my heart on my sleeve. So I once again was
13-year-old girl. Here she comes.
Just get dumped. And I said, Jacob, I said, that means the world to me. I said, but how? How did that impact you? And he said, and he reiterated what the coaches had said. He goes, I've always been good enough where I could get away with anything. I could talk back to any coach as much as I wanted. I could just mouth off to players, to officials. I was always allowed to play. And he goes, Coach, and his eyes got like bigger than saucers. He goes, Coach, I'm in college now and I have a part-time job. And that just for me, and I pray I never have to kick another young man or young woman off a team. But what a gift he gave me by saying, and in my opinion, God gave us by placing us together again to say, hey, listen, you loved him enough to kick him off the team. You loved him enough to follow up after you kicked him off the team. Yeah. And then he had the courage as a young man to see that as a positive, because we all know he could have used that as a crutch. Yep. He could have gone down a completely different road and said, Coach Hines ruined my life. Coach Hines.
You could have been sitting in front of the school board. I mean,
you've heard that probably a lot, that coaches ruin lives.
Yeah, right.
Ruin careers. They could have been in the NBA, but
right.
Yeah, and how hard was that? Because I'm going to tell you, I'm a pretty, I know what I believe and I know how I want to coach, but one of my hardest things is following through on something like that. I think if he had come back in my office with his mom, I would have said, I would have been like, okay, you seem like you're really sorry. You learned a lesson over the last 2 weeks. You know what? Let's go ahead and try. I mean, that would have been me, and it would have been, I think I would have known it wasn't the right choice. But it is very difficult. I mean, how do you get past that wanting to like give that back to them?
Yeah, it came through a lot of prayer and a lot of just soul searching for myself, and just realizing that had been his whole life. He probably in the back of his mind, and I never asked this, I should have, but he and his mom were probably still, even after the email, probably walking to my office, still expecting, hey, that was a scare tactic or whatever. Yeah. I think the reason I was so emotional about it at that moment was because I didn't ever want to give up on a child. And then what I realized, once again, through a lot of self-reflection, was I didn't give up on him.
Yes.
Because I'm still in contact with him now. I still talk to him after. I didn't give up on him. I loved him enough to say, hey, football is not something you've earned anymore for this time being. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel, with my getting arrested so many times and literally putting my parents through hell, and all these different people I fought and police officers. None of them ever gave up on me, and it would have been so easy for my parents to say, listen, you got arrested again, because it was multiple times and we're done. And they never said that. And they didn't bail me out time and time again. And I had to certainly pay my dues. But I think it's important when you love someone to say, I love you. And because I love you, I'm calling you on your BS. Because I love you, I'm not going to let you. I had a coach a few years back who was saying some words. We have no swearing policy in our program. And I always tell our players, it's not because I think I'm better than someone that swears. Has nothing to do with that. I know some very successful, amazing people who swear like sailors. I said, the reason we're not doing it is because I don't want to be in a game, preseason, postseason, anything in between, and have us think we have a bad call, get mouthy to the official, and have it cost us 5, 15 more yards, whatever it is. I said, I don't want you to leave our team, and when you have your first job and your boss says, hey, we need you to stay late tonight, or you need to work this weekend, and typically you don't, to have you get mouthy and then have to go home to your spouse and say, hey, I just lost my job. I couldn't have a cool head about it.
It is a habit. It is definitely a habit, that, and you do it without realizing it.
It is. And for me in high school and college, same thing. And I was never raised that way. My parents would have killed me. But when I was around my friends, I used to swear all the time. And it was, I think, about a month before my first teaching job, 3rd grade, I woke up with cold sweats. And it was one of those like panic attacks. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I drop?
Something's going to slip.
Whatever word in the class. That's not like, oh, Mr. Hines messed up. That's like, hey, you're out of a job, So I actually had a game this year. One of my assistant coaches is a former Navy SEAL, and he trains Navy SEALs now. He's a bad mofo. This guy.
Wow, I do not want to be on your team because I'm getting cold sweats.
And he coming from me as the head coach, we were in a game and he was swearing over the headset a few things. And I would look down the sideline and he wouldn't be near players. So it didn't bother me. I'm like, that's fine. They can't hear what's going on. Fast forward a little bit later on in the game, players are all behind us. And he's like, oh, and he said something. And I looked at him, I was like, Coach, do your push-ups. And the policy is just do 25 push-ups.
Yeah.
And I want, if you swear in front of the players, do them in front of the players.
Yeah.
He apologized, did his push-ups. And afterwards, I was laughing to myself driving home. I'm like, never thought I'd tell a Navy SEAL to do his push-ups. Yeah.
He's probably like 25.
Try to give me 25.
One hand or two,
25,000 or are we talking?
Right. And he apologized the following morning also at the coaches meeting. And I said, and I love this man. I said, you don't need to. I said, we come from completely different worlds. In my world as an elementary school teacher, I should not and cannot swear.
Yeah.
I said, you're around Navy SEALs all the time. If you didn't swear, they'd probably think something was wrong with you.
Here's my question, just to kind of like pull this all in, and we're talking about impact, and you obviously had a big change. I know Trent, having kids is powerful, right? It's life changing. You have kids, you question where your path is and what you're doing. What helped you? Because part of it's just the decision to make a change. But what else? What helped you stay on track?
Just that it's something I can take no credit for, to be honest. It's just having those little moments with the individuals through your lives. It feeds off you. I think it's like when we work out. Once you start to see a change in your body, it becomes like an addiction in a way, sometimes in a good way. Once you see someone's eyes light up, once you have, and I'm not saying this to be funny, a young man just came to our weight room, never played football, wants to play now. He's, close to 350 pounds, and he's not 6 feet yet, and he's only a freshman. And I remember talking to him. I was like, man, I really hope you play. And his eyes lit up, and he's like, you do? I'm like, yeah. So I started talking about his family. Well, his mother passed away from a drug overdose a few years ago. He lives with his father, his grandfather, his uncle, or his grandmother, rather. Grandmother, father, and uncle. But here's a young man. I'm like that excites me as much as when a stud moves into town. And I look him up and down. I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
It's Thor. We got Thor, you guys.
Right. Well, in Coronado, and we live off the island, but Coronado Island itself, there's a naval base. So we have a great mix of families that come in, and then a challenge of families leaving. So you might have a stud come in.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Our starting quarterback 2 years ago, starting quarterback and safety, stud player. After his junior year, he moved in his junior year. His father got relocated, and he was gone.
You calling the Navy? Were you like, I'd like to? Could we not have him transfer right now?
I called Donald. I was like, listen, Mr. Trump.
The Donald. Hey.
But that's what keeps me going is just I've been so blessed to meet so many amazing people. And you hear the cliche, at the end of my, when I'm on my deathbed, I want to know I made a difference. Gosh, as teachers and coaches, if we go about it the right way, every single day we have a chance to make a difference. Every single day. So that's what keeps me going. It's just I truly feel called to be a blessing to others, and it's in some ways it's selfish because I get such a rush out of it. Also, I love that. I love being able to know that I made a difference years ago, but I made a difference yesterday. When I leave today and go to our workouts, I'm going to make a difference today. So I think for me, the football analogy is always having your head in the swivel, looking for things, and I'm sure it applies to a lot of
lacrosse too, and probably basketball. Yeah.
You're not going to get picked. You're not going to get a crack block or whatever it is. If you go through life with your head on a swivel, looking for opportunities to serve others, you're going to be overwhelmed with what God puts in front of you. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I just think about that leaving that impact on other people, and my theme has always been build, not break, because it's not that we won't make an impact. It's that what kind of impact are we making? And every person you pass on the street and you don't lift your eyes and acknowledge that they exist, or you don't say hello, or you don't give them a smile, or someone cracks a joke and you just walk away, and you don't give them that interaction, you're leaving an impact. And what kind of trail do we want to create? And you do that every single day until the days that we're not here anymore. And so I just think that's so awesome. And your Twitter, one of the reasons why I love your Twitter so much is because you are unapologetically Coach Hines. And you're almost like, you're getting it. So get ready, or like just scroll past this now if you're going to have a problem. And you're not like, I'm going to type this. You're like, this is a video. I'm making this. And I'm like, yes, dude, this is our point. I've been pointing in this picture. Well, it's not really there. Green screen. I've been pointing in this picture for weeks now. So this is a joke.
I love it.
But I love that for somebody else out there who is like, I really, because I get this question all the time. Like, man, I have all these thoughts about coaching and leadership, but I'm afraid to put myself out there, because you know what happens when you take a side, or when you put yourself, and we know that because we've had that. I know Trent, you've had that too, because Trent will do the same thing. He will put anything out there that he wants to put out there. And so what advice do you have for people that are like, I have a message to share, but I'm afraid of the backlash?
You can focus on the fear or focus on the possibility of changing one life. I mean, and you hit the nail on the head. I realize anything any of us put out there, whether it's written word or video, the best way to never get critiqued is to get off all social media. No one will ever say another bad word behind me, but whatever. They still will. They'll say, hey, remember that guy
find a way.
that does little selfie videos? It's the opportunity and the possibility of making a positive impact in someone's life, for me, far outweighs the fear of someone judging me. And I taught with a great friend years ago who said, he would always say, someone's going to find something wrong with the Taj Mahal. It doesn't matter how magnificent, how beautiful it is. There's going to be someone who judges you no matter what. And sometimes it's going to be a family member. Sometimes it's going to be a complete stranger who you'll never meet. And I think the world, once again, is over. I truly believe the world is overpopulated with people who, and it breaks my heart, timidly live in fear of what other people will think. And I think that's, the 5 most dangerous words in the world. If I have this right, what will other people think? It's just, no matter what you do, live your life. And there might be one person. And I hate to admit this. I'm really not proud of this, but I used to do videos and think to myself before I posted them, and I hate that I'm saying this, but it's true. I'm just being transparent. I used to think, will this get a lot of likes?
Yeah.
How immature, how stupid is that? And I've grown from that. Now it truly is, hey, God, if you put it on my heart, if this reaches one person, awesome. And that's truly what it is. And I'm sure, just like the two of you, my phone blows up all the time from people I've never met. And my wife, who's my best friend, we're actually celebrating tomorrow. We're heading out to Palm Springs for our 27th wedding anniversary.
Yes, congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. I am so blessed. But she used to say to me all the time, she's like, you don't have to respond to everyone. I'm like, nah, I know I don't, but what if that one person reaches out to 30 people and 30 of them never respond? Yeah. What if it's just, so I just think it's just this tool right here, this social media, it's, for me, it's like a loaded gun. In the wrong hands, it's going to do a lot of damage. In the right hands, it's going to save a lot of lives. And I truly believe the message you guys are putting out there will save, if it hasn't already, will save someone's life. Why? Because one coach who maybe is just getting started, or a coach who's coached for 30 years, but coached under some jackwagon that did it all wrong and never said the word love. If it changes one life, man, then I'll go out and say it. Then there's not a more successful podcast than yours.
Yeah.
There are other successful
greatest podcast there ever was,
right?
Or ever will be.
We'll
go ahead and say it. We've been saying it already.
Yeah. I love it. It's just for the people that might be listening to this or watching this saying, yeah, but what if? Take that same question. What if you don't share it and one person needed to hear that message? It's just those opportunities in life are all around us. To hold the door open for someone at a grocery store, or to I'm not going to get more preachy than I have maybe, but life is full of opportunities to bless people. If we, as Kate said, just pick our eyes up from our phone when we're walking down the hallway or the street. Look, I love looking to make eye contact rather. Look to make those connections with people, because you might be, we're called to greatness, and I think we're called to help other people find their greatness. Yeah.
Look at where we've ended up. And I say this all the time, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, I would be doing my mission, no matter what it looked like, wherever I am. I believe in blooming where you're planted, but the reason I'm doing these specific things I'm doing is because I walked through an airport in 2013 and there was a guy standing by a smoothie stand, and he happened to see my US lacrosse stuff on, and we made eye contact, and he came over and asked me if I knew people on the US lacrosse team. And that conversation was with John Gordon, who I had never heard of and never met. And now I'm his, VP of leadership development. I just wrote a book with him. That was what, eight years ago or whatever. And, that's because I didn't walk through the airport with my head in my phone. And, the reason that I'm sitting next to Trent here and we're doing this unbelievable podcast, which by the way, is going to be actually a foundation. We're going to go and impact inner cities. We're going to go spread this as far and wide as we can. The reason we're doing that is because he happened to send me a Twitter message, and he sent me that little documentary clip, which we're going to send you on the team and what they're doing. And I said, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I want to talk to your team. That's how this grew. And it's about keeping your head on a swivel, keeping your eyes up, because man, we can keep our heads down and say there's no opportunities, or we can look at what's in front of us and we can grow those seeds into the opportunities with the gifts that we've been given on the mission that we are on. And we're so excited that we got to have you on here today. And maybe I'll keep some of my dogs barking in the background because we're going to keep this real.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's a blessing, truly a blessing to be connected. And just this world isn't going to change by itself. So knowing you're in the same field with passionate people is a pretty cool thing.
Wow. What an amazing conversation with Coach Kurt Hines. Kate, what do you think about that?
That was incredible. I took away so many things, and I saw you like just scribbling notes like you were watching the show, which was pretty incredible. How many pages of notes did you get there?
Hey, he's a coach. I'm a coach. I got 3-4 pages of notes. So
nice.
Very, very
nice. I love it. Well, we covered a lot of ground, but what I really, really took for myself was that piece at the end when Coach Hines was talking about speaking his truth. And, that's what he's known for, and being able to face that fear. And I think we need to have a challenge that we're going to give out. What do you think?
I think we should do let's call it the Impact Challenge for the week.
I like this. All right, let's do it.
I think our Impact Challenge for the week is so our listeners can get out and leave their impacts. What do you think about that?
I love it. I think helping people get started is, leaving an impact on the world is what this podcast is all about. So Impact Challenge number 1, I got this. All right. It's going to be to go out and speak your voice to something that is important to you. Speak up for somebody else, speak up for something that you believe in, something that normally you would maybe hold back because you're afraid of being judged. Look at the importance of getting it out there and what could happen if you didn't, and speak it anyway. And if you get a chance to do it this week, if your team has a challenge and say your team is working towards it, I want you guys to hashtag be inimitable, tag us in that so we can see it, so we can celebrate it, so we can retweet it, and that you might be able to inspire somebody else to step forward. That's what this impact is all about. What do you think?
100% agree. And then make sure you hashtag us, be inimitable, on Instagram or Twitter, and we will make sure we get back to you. We are excited to share these stories with everyone and get it out there. So
what about Coach Kurt Hines? They got to be able to find him. What are his handles so people can?
I know all his handles are super easy.
All right, what is it?
Coach Kurt Hines, Hines.
Nice. So, and then his website, same thing.
CoachKurtHines.com.
Well, I think we're going to be able to remember that. And you can look us up too. So we've got Twitter. I'm at Kate Lavelle. What are you?
I'm at Coach Trent Witz. You can find me there.
Cool. I like it. I think we're ready to hit the week. You ready?
Blooper reel.
I think so, but I just want to give everyone a little preview for next week. You're not going to want to miss this show because we have a very special guest coming on to tell an incredible story. So make sure you tune in.
That was a terrible preview. We don't. What was the preview part?
All right, let's go.
You can't say preview and then not tell them anything.
Oh, I just said preview? Oh, okay.
Here's a preview. Psych.
that was the point I was going by. I said, you ain't going to want to miss it. So make sure you guys tune in next week, next Monday, when we drop a new episode.
Who do we have?
Minnesota legend, Vice President of Basketball Development for the Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx.
Oh, who's that?
John Thomas.
Yes.
Wait till you hear his story.
That is amazing.
It's going to be a good one. So make
Dude,
sure
tall. How tall is he?
6'8", 6'7". I got a picture next to him. I'm looking like I'm 6'2", and I'm looking like I'm.
You looked about 5 feet tall next to
Exactly.
him. Not gonna lie.
But he's a great guy. You guys are not gonna want to miss his story. But make sure you go out, do the Impact Challenge, hashtag us, make it a good week, and don't forget to be inimitable.
Impact.